Hello, everyone, and welcome to the On Time, On Target Financial Thought Leadership Series. And I am so excited to have to you today a special guest, PattiKatter, who is involved in all kinds of amazing things. And Patti and I met. We haven't ever met in person, but feel like I know her and wanted to have her on the show to tell her story because she has so many things out there that give a message of not only helping veterans, which we met through a veterpreneur, if I'm saying that right, Facebook page where a bunch of us are veterans and entrepreneurs are tied to the military. And then I started looking into some of her content as far as her podcast and her Facebook page, looking for messages of positivity. And then as I dug a little deeper, I found out she has other things that she's working on. You'll hear about ThePatrioticMermaid, what a cool name, but I'll let her tell you all about all of that sort of stuff. As you can see in the background, looks like she's in a very cool place, coming in from Florida. With that, Patti, I'd like to welcome you to the show and tell us a little bit about your backstory. I hope our listeners get to know you a little bit.
Thank you, Steve. It's really a pleasure to be on the show. I've listened to your podcast. It's amazing. I just appreciate you extending the offer to me. So basically, I was born in Flint, Michigan, and as a normal, everyday kind of middle-class girl growing up, in high school, I wrote for the Flint Journal, 10th grade and 11th grade, I believe. And it was an amazing experience. I found out then that you can use your voice to really make some changes. So when I was in high school, I wrote an article about our school lunches, and the principal called me down to the office the next day, and I thought I was going to get in trouble because I had mentioned, the hamburgers were a little greasy and things like that. But they changed the entire school lunch menu because of that article and thanked me. So that's kind of where I fell in love with journalism. And I ended up meeting my husband in Michigan. We met in Saginaw, Michigan. He was just getting out of the Marine Corps at the time, and he became a police officer for over a decade, where I served as a police reservist for 4 years. And he ended up joining the Army post 9/11. So I'm not really sure how much further you want me to go into the past. Do you have any questions for me so far?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. I liked how when you said you put some content out there, in high school, and then you immediately got called in. It's funny, as a content creator, we're out there talking about things all the time, and you're right. Sometimes the phone rings and you're like, oh, I wonder what, if this person's, did I say something wrong, or somebody doesn't like my message or something like that. So I think that's funny you bring up that story. But if you don't mind sharing, you have an amazing backstory with your husband as far as serving as a military spouse. And, my listeners know that we're retired military, and my wife was on that journey for most of the time, and how difficult a military spouse life can be. It's as if both people are serving, because you're both at the whim of the military, right? But then if you want to share about anything about your husband's situation and what led to maybe some veterans efforts, we'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, so we were living cozy in Michigan in Bridgeport, and we had a house. It was about 4,000 square feet. We had property. It was 30 acres. My goodness, my tongue's getting all twisted. But basically we had it made. We had a great little location. We had great property. He had a fantastic job making a decent amount of money. But post 9/11, he really had the burden and want to serve our military again. So he talked to me a little bit about it. Of course, I'm not going to hold anybody back from their dreams. So I was all in. I'm like, okay, if this is really, really what you want to do, let's do it. So he ended up going to training really quickly after he joined the Army. And while he was gone, I stayed back home, sold the house, and shortly after, we ended up moving to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Huge difference compared to living on 30 acres than being in a military housing situation, right?
Yep.
So it was fun. We made a lot of friends. That was very short-lived. He ended up going to help with Hurricane Katrina cleanup shortly after he joined the Army, and things began to snowball. I don't think either of us realized the events that were about to happen. He ended up getting deployed to Iraq for 15 months. Several in his unit were killed, several were wounded. He was one of them that was wounded in war. And by that time, we actually had a house outside of base, and my parents lived right next door to us. So thankfully I had a little bit of support there, but my mom was battling breast cancer, so they were dealing with that too. But we definitely had some challenges during that deployment, that 15 months. It was kind of rocky at home, just because when he was deployed, I was back home helping with the military families who were left, back at home,
Sure.
waiting for their loved one to come back from combat. I started a support group, and that's where I began podcasting, actually. I was a support group leader for military spouses, and some of them started moving back home. So I thought the best way to communicate with them would be to start an online talk radio show. So that's where I started back in 2006.
Oh, very cool. So when I hear 2006 and I hear podcasting, uh, I know that, I mean, I, in my own personal journey, I thought around 2010 or 2012 that I'm like, okay, I'm going to retire, go off, do my own thing, and eventually support it with a podcast, which I've been at a whopping 6 months and probably laughably bad at it so far, right? Because I just don't have the experience and I don't know what I don't know. But 14 years ago, if my math is right, I mean, was podcasting a thing, or were you kind of blazing a trail of just I believe and I think I can do this and went from there?
I was kind of winging it. So to go back a little bit, while we were in Michigan, I was communicating a little bit back and forth with Casey Kasem, who was my husband's cousin. And he talked about his experience in the Army and how he started on a radio broadcast. And it kind of got me thinking, fast forward when Ken was deployed, I thought a radio broadcast would be good, but we don't need something that big. What can I do maybe online to support our military spouses?
Right.
So I found this little rinky-dink online platform called Talk Radio, or it was Shoe Talk Radio, I think it was. And then I did that with a couple military spouses, and that we kind of transferred over to Blog Talk Radio, and I did that for several years. It evolved from being just a military caregiver or military spousal support to, after my husband was injured, it became a platform to teach communities what they could do for our military veterans who are coming back from combat to bridge that life after war. So yeah, it's funny how things worked out. It's a lot to take in, even for me still, when I try to organize the story of myself in my head, there's just so much that was going on.
Right.
From, my husband being deployed to our friends getting wounded or unfortunately killed, or some of the veterans who were at Fort Bragg, they didn't have family members. So I kind of stepped in and helped some of the single soldiers who didn't have family at Fort Bragg that were able to help them. So I know it's a lot I just threw at you.
No, that's good. And I'm having fond memories of, I've been retired for 7 years now, but it seems like yesterday. And when the listeners are out there that are not associated with the military, you might hear like Spouse Support Network, and you can think, okay, well, that's the moms with the kids. And that's not it at all. It's really, the way I talked about it in the Air Force it's when the unit deploys, not everybody goes. First of all, most people go, but there are some folks that are left behind for whatever reason. But there's kind of an away team and a home team. And when you go off to war, like we were dating when I went off to Iraqi freedom in 2003, and she's like, when are you going to be home? And I'm like, well, I'll be home when it's over, which means I don't know. And you're right, everything on the home front, you just mentioned casually, I had to sell our house. And normally in a household, you have the division of duties, whatever that happens to be. Well, when one person leaves, the other person gets all of the duties. So it can really be a support group of not just, you're right, the folks that are married and at home, but also the single folks as well. So it's amazing and if you've seen some of the TV shows, really do capture this very well, of when you hear military spouses, how strong they are, because they're not only dealing with the day-to-day of life, which is difficult because you're by yourself, right? Now, it used to be a team, now you're by yourself for a while. And then, of course, the added layer of the emotional impact of someone being off at war and the unknown. I used to talk about flying. It's much easier for me when I would fly in combat, because I knew when I was at risk. I'm getting in my airplane and I'm flying over bad guy land. I know they're shooting. I can process all that. My spouse or my girlfriend at the time did not know that, right? She's assuming I'm getting shot at 24/7, which is not really the case. But yeah, it's such a good story. And the things, I know you've done several things over the years to kind of help veterans. Any of those you kind of want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that with my husband's unit, they were hit really, really hard. He was a Cav Scout in the Army, and things just kept happening over there. Every day I'd get a phone call from the Family Readiness Program that was supposed to be set up at Fort Bragg to help families. But honestly, we were all so burned out from the stress that I think that the biggest takeaway is it's not just military families taking care of each other, but communities taking care of military families too. And I think that basically everybody, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting lost here because I'm thinking everyone in our community should be reaching out to our military veterans. Even now, right now, it's crazy in America. There's a lot of things going on. And I just talked to a National Guard member who's in DC right now. And he's kind of struggling because of the atmosphere. It's very heavy there right now.
Yeah.
So I just kind of encourage people to really reach out to our military and our law enforcement and those who are trying to protect our freedoms, and just to kind of step back and appreciate them, because I feel like right now our country is in just such disarray, and we need to all step together and still help our military veterans, be it through a nonprofit or yourself. I really encourage people just to reach out themselves personally to your local VFW or whatever. So what was the other part of the question?
Well, I just had a thought on that while you just mentioned, the DC member, and for our listeners, we're recording this on a few days after the January 6th event, so it'll come out a little bit later after that. But it reminded me of the time, right? You're in the military, you think, okay, I'm going to go off and fight bad guys and protect our freedoms from the enemy, not necessarily doing a protection around the the Capitol. So it is kind of a shift in mindset for me personally. And you mentioned 9/11 and how your husband was called upon to go serve. After 9/11, as a pilot, it went from us shooting down enemy air forces, which is what we had trained to do, is how to make a mental mind shift of, now we are training on what if we get the order to shoot down an airliner. And you're right, it's a mental mind shift that not everybody's immediately able to process. So reaching out for help is certainly imperative if you're struggling at all. So, and thank you for throwing out some of the resources for folks to reach out there. So let's transition to, so when did your primary podcast, or at least as far as primary to me, waking up with PattiKatter, and the positivity and the motivational, and I love, again, the daily content that you put out. Tell us kind of about that podcast. How long has it been under that name, and what are your goals there?
Mm-hmm. So I started Wake Up with PattiKatter at the end of 2019. As you can tell by my story, it's a little bit discombobulated, but I started podcasting in 2006, and I started with subjects like military spouses. And then, as you know, it evolved to helping communities bridge the gap from veterans coming home from war. And it was around 2017 or 18, I really kind of started thinking about doing my own podcast, and kind of veering not away from military veteran issues, because I still have a lot of military on my show, but bringing in civilians who also have stories of trial or triumph over trial. I thought it was really important to show our military members that regular civilians also have a lot of issues that they've had to deal with. I had a bodybuilder on my show. He was a paraplegic bodybuilder, and he was paralyzed in a car accident. And because of that show, some of our military who have had accidents or injury, they listened and they're like, wow, I didn't even know that there was a bodybuilding anything for paraplegics. So showing that the civilians also have trials to overcome, I everybody to be able to help each other. I was at a point in life where I didn't want to be just known as a military veteran caregiver. I want to be known as somebody who's helping other people. I want other people to feel comfortable asking me questions so that I can help, because I really believe that our life experiences should be used to help other people, and your story should not be taken in vain, you know?
Right. Well, what I hear from your words is that everything you're talking about, it's overloaded with passion of wanting to help and support and make kind of the world a better place. So for those that are listening out there, whether you're military or in a civilian job or wherever you're at in your stage of life, is the important part here is hearing that passion, and then how you can turn that passion into something that other people can find value with, monetarily or not. I was going to ask earlier. So a lot of these things, were they pursuits of passion, or have they been able to make money along the way or did you have any backing along the way where anybody was kind of paying you to help get a message out, if you don't mind?
So for several years, over a decade, I just volunteered my time. And then I did work for a military nonprofit for about 4 years and did a podcast for them. And finally, around the 2017-18 mark, I thought, geez, all these years I've been volunteering and I love it. But I'm at a point where if our family wants to grow financially, it's up to me. So I started my own podcast at the end of 2019, and I've been growing it with the intention of finding sponsorship and ad placement and things like that on my podcast. I am on Heroes Media Group. They're a network. They're a really great network owned by a military veteran. And they put my podcast out for free. But then I also am on several other podcast platforms, actually all of them, I think, and Amazon TV and Roku. And I have a lot of people who are not necessarily financially backing me, not all of them, but some of that is coming into fruition now.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear, especially for folks that are going to trying to stand stuff up. When you do it, at least from my perspective, yeah, it's my ideas, my expertise, my thoughts, and a microphone and a camera, right? Which you can do start from your smartphone. But then over time, sure, there are certain ways to try to use, like social media. A couple other the experts that I'm interviewing in the part of this series are social media experts, which do talk about leading to monetization and sponsorships and those sorts of things, which is always, passion first, add value to people's lives. And then if that other stuff can help you take care of your own life, then absolutely. So
Right.
I did ask earlier, when I hear a wake up show, I immediately think of, I want to, not only am I listening to Patti in the morning, I want to have a Patti coffee mug. So can I get one of those, or is that something that's going to happen down the road?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on some new designs that are going to be podcast oriented for my podcast and for other podcasters who might want merchandise out there. So if you go to ThePatrioticMermaid.com, that has all my apparel line. It has some hats and some tote bags and things, but we're adding some new designs coming very soon. I actually have a meeting with some of my store members, and that's coming next week. So it's going to be really soon. I do want to add too that for so long, I focused on helping other people and volunteering my time that I almost felt bad asking people to either support the podcast. You can go to Anchor.fm and find my podcast, and you're able to become a listener sponsor now. And that's because I have a really great mentor that is helping me get over some of these things that I was having a hard time with. So, I've been volunteering ever since I was a kid. Even I raised money to help somebody build a church. And my whole life I've been volunteering and helping people. And his one great piece of advice that your people who are listening, who really want to start their own business, should take is it's okay to make money. And the more money you make, the more people you can help. So now I'm shifting my mindset to I'm going to make more money, and I can use some of that money to help other people. So I don't feel so bad just taking it all in.
I hear you, and I think that's a great message. And to a certain way, out of the military, I was very used to, serving, and I had sort of the same transition. And I also have mentors that are out there that kind of help me get my mind around this. And one thing that resonated with me, I use the term wealth a lot. So, there's money and then there's wealth, which is, relationship health, your self-worth, network, there's all things that in addition to money. And it's kind of I was told, is a spread the wealth mentality, certainly help others. And it's okay to have them pay you to do that, because what you're going to do as a good person is turn around and use that money, just like you're saying, to do new things, to get more information out there. And you're really spreading it back to your audience or your listeners or your network, or however you would describe it. So that's good that you bring that up, because you're right. For the entrepreneurs out there, you'll set a price on something and you'll put it out there and you'll immediately wonder, is that too much, too little? You'll beat yourself up over it. So those are good points. I do want to talk about the Patriotic Mermaid. So do you want to tell that's a great name? So how did that come to you, or what's the story behind Patriotic Mermaid?
Yeah, so evolving from being a volunteer pretty much my whole life, I decided that I wanted to start making a better income because, I mean, our kids are grown, but let me tell you, they're more expensive now than they were when they were tiny. So, I mean,
Mine aren't even out of high school yet. So.
Yeah, you have things like weddings and car problems and, oh my goodness, things that are so much more than a cute little pair of toddler shoes to purchase. So I really want my kids to have something when I leave, right? When I'm not here any longer, I want them to have something from me. And obviously, you teach them things that they can take with you emotionally, internally, but I would like to leave them a decent nest egg, So that had been sitting on my heart for a while. And I thought, I want to start a business, but what can I do as a caregiver? Because I still do help my husband with a lot of things, and I'm here for him all the time. So it's very hard for me to go out and have a full-time job. I'm still going with him to his doctor's appointments and helping his schedules and his medication refills and all that stuff. So I thought an apparel line would be nice because I could sell the merchandise online.
Sure, yeah.
And so I started a company, but I still wasn't positive of what I was going to call it. So I was driving to the beach one day trying to relax. I just had the windows open, no music, just thinking, what can I name this company? Because I wanted to be about me finally. Like, I've been doing all this other stuff for everybody else, and I want something for me that I can grow and feel passionate about. And it literally just hit me, the name, The Patriotic Mermaid. One of my friends was always calling me a mermaid because I would try to go to the beach for my self-care a couple of times a month. And patriotic, I'm definitely patriotic. So the name Patriotic Mermaid came to my mind, and it just has been evolving ever since.
That's a great story. I love asking folks when they, when somebody has their own business, it's like, where'd you come up with the name? And I just love the story that comes out of that. And sure, tying things that you're passionate about, that's perfect. And it's good that you found the perfect name. I'm going through a little rebranding in my wealth management business, where I started off as Afterburner Financial, largely because I couldn't let go of the airplane. So I wanted to tie something from my times back in the military, but it really didn't describe where I missed the mark, because it didn't describe what I did. So that's where I had to kind of take the name and transition it to something else. So with your Patriotic Mermaid line, for everybody that's out there listening, if you're hearing this stuff, it's just patrioticmermaid.com. Also in the show notes, I'm going to have Patti's website, which has access to all of her things, just PattiKatter.com, for you to be able to navigate around. So if you're listening to Patti, you can access any of these that you're interested in. But as we go into the close here, Patti, the journey makes all of us, right? And that's for those that are entrepreneurs that are listening or wondering about entrepreneurial life, in my mind, the best part about it is you don't know the end of the story. There's not in the military, it's just like you do this and here's your ranks, and then, it's so scripted. But it's the journey that makes us who we are. So if you could, what advice would you have for a younger version of yourself? Rewind the clock a decade or a couple decades, or wherever you want to kind of pick it up. What would you tell yourself what would you advise yourself to do differently? Or for our younger listeners out there, what would you have to offer them?
So I think one of the biggest hurdles that I had was getting over myself so my business could grow. every time I went to post on social media, I would second guess myself. Is this okay to post? What if people don't like it? I really think it's important to go ahead and share what you're passionate about. And if your heart is right, the people who know you and the people who listen to you are going to know that you have, what you're saying, you're trying to say in a positive way, or a way that will help people. And I was too wrapped up in basically self-sabotaging myself because I wasn't confident enough to put out what I needed to put out soon enough. And then also knowing that it's okay to make money to, for your family. And for whatever reason in my head, ever since I was little, like I said, I was just always giving, giving, giving. And I didn't realize that it is important to be able to give to yourself so that you can give into your family. And I think that's my biggest advice is, it's not a bad thing to do really well financially for yourself so that you can help more people, or for whatever reasons to help your own family. You don't even, if you're out there and you're a business owner, you don't have to give all your money away and help a bunch of people. Helping your own family grow, it's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, well, those are great words. It's okay to give to yourself. And yeah, I think that's a common tendency. Those of us with either a military or service background, I'm sure, same with police force and roles where we're used to serving others. And now making a transition, I think you're right. That is difficult. So thank you for sharing that. And hopefully our listeners out there that are kind of facing that, if you're facing that hurdle, you hear enough of us say it to where, it really can make a difference on taking yourself and your business to the next level. So Patti, thank you for coming on to the show to share your story with all of us. Everything about what you do is tied around service and passion. So I thank you as a former veteran, and I also thank you, fellow podcaster, even though you're far more experienced than I am, for coming on and talking about your experiences today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your service.
No, it was my pleasure. I was at one of the best jobs out there as far as being in the military, is getting to fly some interesting airplanes. So thank you for saying that. For our listeners, that's all we have for today's show. Please reach out to me at steve@ototnow.com with any questions or comments on today's show. And again, you can find all of Patti's information in the show notes down below. So thanks again for joining Patti and I today. And here's to you fighting the good fight every day to be on time, on target with your financial goals. Thanks.